Hi, this is Heather Picken, and welcome to the Woman on Fire Entrepreneur Podcast. How to break through anything, become unstoppable, and be profitable. Learn how to align your mind. Yeah, I call that activating your money mojo. Market to your ideal clients and make money doing what you love. Tired of struggling and trying to figure things out? Do you tend to stop when things get tough? Well, I'm here to steer the ship out of the sea of overwhelm so that you can attract money and success in your business now. Grab your favorite beverage, let's fire it up, get inspired, and live life at your highest potential. Here's Heather with her co-host Chihuahua, Frankie Lee. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Woman on Fire Entrepreneur Show coming to you. I was going to say coming to you live, but this is pre-recorded. But there's actually two different ways how you can tune into this show. The first way is through iTunes. And if you want to watch us on video, you can go over to youtube.com/Heather Picken. And I'm so excited and on fire and inspired to really bring some amazing guests all around the world. And really my inspiration and mission is helping particularly women entrepreneurs that want to go and grow to the next level of their business. And sometimes, things can hold them back. We all have stories of, where we were before and how we created our success. And I love my expert today because we're going to be talking about that, about stories, using that in your business, really being authentic, standing in your juicy self. So I want to welcome Brenda Adelman, and hopefully I got your last name correct. Yeah, thumbs up, as my guest today. So Brenda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm excited to be here and talk to your audience.
And so we're talking about stories. So if you could share with our listeners and viewers, share us a little bit about your story and how you help people.
Okay, and I have a big story, and my business has been based on my story. It grew out of me telling it actually as a one-person show. That was the first way that I told my story, because I was already an actress when something quite traumatic happened. I'll just start with it. In 1995, my father shot and killed my mother and then married her sister. Hence, that's a pretty darn big story. Very Shakespearean in a way. And in my one-woman show, I actually include about 5 soliloquies from Hamlet because I searched somewhere, and for me in literature, I found a character, someone who had gone through what I did. So what I found is the first few years after my mother was murdered, because of the story, and it doesn't have to be that big. I've worked with people for so many years now. It doesn't have to be the specifics of what happened to my story, but who hasn't experienced loss, betrayal, or, for me, what happened was I felt like damaged goods because of what happened in my family. And so that kept me in shame, and it kept me in hiding, and it kept me depressed, and it kept me isolated. And it was only in sharing my story that I started to heal. And the first step in that for me as an actress was not, I'm going to put on, a show about my life, because I was in a lot of shame. I thought I'd get a lot of judgment. Instead, I was in this top acting class in LA, and I did something called a story exercise, which was about, like you said, being real and being authentic. And when I got up on stage and did this short piece, instead of getting judgment, I got love. Instead of getting shamed, I got people sharing with me their own secrets. And I started to realize that the specifics of my story weren't what was important. Being authentic and sharing with an open heart was what connected me to other people. And now that's what I do. I teach other people how to actually be able to handle their emotions so they don't overtake them, so that they can share their story and make a difference in the world.
I absolutely love that. And I would have to agree that it is so important to take a so-called, what I call like a so-called tragedy, because it's all about our perception, and everyone has a value system in which they're labeling an incident good or bad. And I really just see it as neutral, and looking at how you can take that story and transcend and transform people's lives to really, connect them. Because let's face it, we do business how we connect with people through their stories. And now more than ever, I really do believe we're living in an age of authenticity, and people can read through, and I'm going to swear, the bullshit. They can read and see and, hear if someone is not being authentic. And now, you're looking at technology ever progressing, you have to be authentic. You have to use your voice and your story. So one of the first things that I want to ask you is, some people might be scared to put themselves out there. Let's talk about that. And they're questioning themselves, well, do I really have enough experience to put myself out there with my work? So let's talk about those two things.
There are keep that in mind, because you just said so many things I want to address.
I know.
So the first thing, just to backtrack just a second ago, you talked about how the story is neutral. There's nothing right or wrong, which is really like the foundation of what I teach. The Shakespeare's quote, "There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And perception is like the foundation of my work. And so your other two questions, I'll get to them in a second, I might be addressing them here, is that people are scared to put themselves out there, and maybe rightfully so, because if they haven't done the inner work to heal their emotions and get out of the right and wrong of things, then they're going to bring that with them when they're sharing. They're either going to bring it with them and they're going to get overly emotional, or you're going to sense that this person has anger when you're like, what are they angry about? So they really can't get the message across, or what they're selling. It'll be, they'll be communicating something, but they'll be like, something's off and you don't know why. So you really so I went back to school and got a master's degree in spiritual psychology. So for 2 years, I worked my process at a really deep level so I could move from being a victim to what happened to not to stop asking why, and instead saying, okay, how can I serve now? How can I move past this? How can I thrive? How can I love again? So the emotional thing is really important. And then the other thing that people do is, if they haven't healed their inner stuff, they don't talk about it. So it's almost like this feeling like someone's hiding something, even though they're meaning to be authentic and they are being authentic to a level. There's this layer, and I'm not even saying you have to share all the details of something. You don't, but you have an opportunity to heal what's underneath so that you can be that neutral vessel. Just like as an actor, you have to kind of know yourself so well so that you can be neutral and add things on. It's the same thing when you're presenting or you're selling something, I think. I hope I answered those questions. I'm not sure if I did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think it's so powerful because, yeah, as I mentioned, people are scared to put themselves out there. And I do find if you're willing, to put yourself out there, you're willing to kind of heal whatever issues are, change your perception, that you're going to show up in a different way. Like, you're really going to be able to own your power. So I was wondering if you could kind of walk through your emotional journey when you put yourself out there being raw and real with your work. Like, what was the thought process that you went through before leading up to that first performance?
Right. Oh my God. Can I curse too? Can I say that?
Absolutely.
It was an inner guidance. It was a good, I think I said almost 3 years that I could not share. Like, people would say, how'd your mom die? And I'd be like, an accident. And it wasn't an accident. She was shot in the head. And something inside me just knew that I had to do this exercise. And I think that was really when I was tapping into, well, what's my inner guidance? Because before my mother died, I certainly didn't tap into, there's something bigger in this world that can guide me, that I am part of. So I was really scared, but it was also the start of me knowing that I had inner guidance and I could just take it. And so when I put up this short piece and I got all these people coming up to me sharing about their things they hadn't forgiven, then a director wanted to work with me, a producer wanted to work with me. I was in LA at the time, and I just went for it. I went on the ride, and then I did that first production of my show. I was still speaking with my dad on and off, and not healed, and didn't know what healthy boundaries were or anything. And so I would do the show, and the show's very funny too. I know, hard to imagine from what I'm saying right now, but it's a very New York story, and there's big characters and all that. Anyway, I would do the show. People would laugh. People would cry. Their hearts would open, because the ending of the show was about that I will love again somehow. And then I would go home to my apartment and I would be lonely and depressed and crying. And so that's when I took the 2 years off and I learned what a healthy boundary was. I actually took my dad to court for wrongful death against my mother. At the same time, I didn't see him again, but I did a ceremony of release with him so that I could shift from whenever he came into my mind from hating him, loving him, hating him to I love him and I wish him well. And I don't want someone who's not remorseful, someone who isn't healthy in my life. So that was kind of the journey. And the journey continued. The emotional journey continued as layers and layers released for me. And actually a huge healing happened in 2007. My brother, who lives in Vienna, my brother and I hadn't spoken for 6 years because we had different fathers. It was my father who killed my mother. He invited me to do my show at a huge Jewish theater festival in Vienna, Austria. And he did the Q&A with me after the show. We had reconciled when we took my dad to court, but my brother was someone of few words. So he never really told anybody what happened in his life. And after that show, people just came over to me, his colleagues, and they were sobbing. And they were like, we had no idea what happened. And it was so healing for my brother and I. And I feel like this is my emotional journey. I feel like up until that point, I still had to do my show. Like there was something in me. I had to do it. I had to do it. And after I did that show, it was so incredibly healing that now I do the show and it truly feels like a gift for other people. And the message of the show is about the power of forgiveness.
I love that. I absolutely love that, you know, that you are a demonstration. And I think it's so important, especially for women to hear this, that you can take this situation and a so-called tragedy. I think there is a quote that, you know, out of tragedy comes comedy, you know, which is true. You know, we can take the most tragic incidents. I mean, look at comedians when they're up, you know, there could be some world event that's happened, catastrophic, and they're making fun of it. And you really have to, I mean, to live in the world that we are today, you really have to navigate around those emotions, because if you don't, your story is going to hold you back. I mean, I speak with so many women around the world, and they share with me their story. They're on their fourth marriage. Their husband left them. They're a single mom. You know, they went bankrupt. They've lost everything. And, you know, I'm like, now is the time to take your power back and to share your story. So what do you think is at risk for women that are not going to, you know, really stand up for themselves, to use their story as a catalyst in their business?
Oh, I think that the first step to my healing was literally journaling about my story and witnessing my story on the page. I have a 3-step forgiveness process. And the first step is, sorry, there's gardeners around. The first step is moving out of denial and into acceptance of what is. So I think using your story, like that's the very first step. Like if someone hasn't looked at their story, they need to write it down honestly. And then this is the thing, you have to share it with someone who is going to support you. I had a very close friend who was very wise, who I shared my writing with and my poetry with, and he was supportive, and it gave me the impetus to go on. Whereas sometimes people share their story with someone who means well, like let's say a family member, and the family member is so wanting to take care of them, they shut them down. And so that's why it's really important to have a coach, have a really wise friend, have a therapist, someone like that you can work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to highlight that for everyone, if you find that your story is holding you back, you definitely need to hire a coach, a mentor, talk to a friend, get it out so that, you know, you can empower other people. You can empower, you know, particularly women, because I find, and it's like, I don't want to call women out, but I am a woman, and let's face it, a lot of times women can be very emotional. They don't know how to handle those emotions. And so they'll play that victim mode instead of being the victor in their life. And so I think it's just so important to say, listen, you don't have to be the victim. You have the power to choose, you know, looking at your perception to really neutralize that situation. And so you've been on this journey. So do you find that, you know, with each, you know, obviously we have this life, this full life that we have many stories. So do you have other stories that continue to come out of this one story?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Lucky me. I got divorced last year. So I have that story to deal with, which was really interesting. Well, there's so many stories. I fell in love with a woman for the first time in my life, and that's who I just got divorced from. So that was interesting to weave that into my big story about my father and my mother, because, when I met my ex and I put her, her character into the show, it was, I think, all of my work is about accepting yourself no matter how you are, who you choose to be with. There's no shame. And so that was actually a really important part of my story. So I love that. And it was also, I've been doing the show for several years. So it was before there was really a shift in my country about sexuality and things like that. And then I got divorced. She left me last year. And what was interesting is it was so harsh and it was so sudden that, because I'm known for my forgiveness work, I have one friend who's like, come on, you're the forgiveness queen. You should be forgiving. And what I said, and this is what I learned, is that, and it's part one of my forgiveness process, when I talk about witnessing your story and getting out of denial, I did not heal until I did an anger exercise, literally releasing my anger. Where you talk about women are very emotional. A lot of times we're crying because we're freaking angry, but we don't know how to express that anger in a healthy way. And so for my friend that time, I was like, you know what? I have to be with this pain. I have to be with this grief, and I have to express my anger in a healthy way. At that time, it was, going to therapy. It was exercising. And then I have specific exercises that I do, that I teach, that was just, writing exercises to get that anger out instead of jumping to, because women do this too. I forgive, it's okay, but it's important to get that anger out. And to actually, in that exercise that I do, it's actually embracing the victim first, because I found with my father, because so many people don't want to be the victim that they end up being the victim. I had to just but what happens is they don't want to be the victim, they move on, but then it leaks out in all these other relationships. So even with my ex, it's like I had to really write how angry I am, how wrong she was, how blah, 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 so that I could then move past it and transcend it into loving and compassion for myself and for her.
I love that. And let's talk about the stories of relationships. I always say the best lessons for me personally have been in the form of men and relationships, because I would be on this path of attracting men that would just totally disempower me. I wouldn't be true to myself. And I kept thinking, I am a smart, educated woman. Why do I keep attracting these men? And I would start beating myself up. And then what I started to do is I started to look at the lessons of growth. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. So I didn't have a charge on it. And a real powerful story that I like to share. And I was really embarrassed before I was sharing it. And when I shared it, I thought, wow, this is really powerful. I was with this guy. I felt that, oh yeah, we're a match or whatever. And of course we weren't. And I kept feeling like I could not embrace my full power, because this person was jealous of me, which I thought was really odd. And he kept pushing me down, putting me down. And so it got to a point where my aunt had to die. She died of stage 4 breast cancer. And so the story goes like this. She was in her hospice bed, and she she didn't have the best relationships herself. I think she was on her 4th relationship. She had 2 marriages, they didn't work out. And so finally, the last couple of years, she found someone that truly accepted her for who she was. Mm-hmm. And, she was literally, almost it was probably a couple of days before she passed, and her then boyfriend proposed to her. He had an engagement ring, and she was unconscious, in her bed, and he slipped the ring or the ring on her finger. It barely fit, it was halfway through, or halfway to her finger. And so I heard that story, and then she died maybe 1 or 2 days after that. And so that story, her story, I had my story, and then she had her story. That story was the catalyst for me to change, because after that happened, I went to that then boyfriend. I said, you know what? I choose me. I am no longer going to accept this. This is crazy. I want to be happy. And so her story helped me to transform my story. And at that time, my business was really suffering because you had mentioned, everything kind of, affects everything else. And so once I let that go, I'm like, I'm going to create a new story. My entire business shifted within a span of like 45 days, generated over $100,000 in my business.
Wow.
And so I'm telling you, what you're teaching and facilitating for people is so important, looking at the stories of other people. And then like, wait a minute, if they can change, so can I. Like, you don't want to live, and this is how I feel, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. I don't want to live another day, where I'm not being authentic and sharing my message and, knowing that I don't have to please everyone. Not everyone likes me. They might not like my hair or how I speak, or I'm a little bit goofy, or sometimes I'm too serious. And I'm like, I really don't care, because now is the time, to live your life for you and to create your own story, be the author of your own life. So, I was wondering what your take on that was.
Exactly. And I like to say it's there, you become the leading lady or the leading man of your life instead of being like a background player, because that's that people pleasing thing that, I'm like that. And that I think sometimes when you have an awakening like you did in that moment, or you live through something big like I did, I want to be authentic. I lived the first half of my life not authentic, caring what everybody else thought. Really, with me, it was kind of trying to save my mother, save my father, be there for them, And I learned that, you don't get anything from that. Not only do you not get anything from that, and in essence, I lost my whole family, but you're not the creator of your life. It's like being in a pinball machine and kind of reacting, going from one thing to another thing. It's like, I don't want my life to be over and me be like, oh, well, at least I was, I mean, there wouldn't be anything because I wouldn't be being true to myself. I feel like I don't have time for small talk. Although, I do like to have fun and I'm quirky and all that, but I don't. It's like after you live through a certain amount of pain and you learn a certain amount of lessons, what I love about it is that I have a capacity to hold and connect, and I have the most amazing friends. I do remember though, and colleagues, I do remember though that when I was shifting and starting to take responsibility for my life, because that's really what the big shift is. It's like, oh, I'm responsible. So if things aren't working, I'm also responsible. If I'm a victim, oh, it's because of the choices I'm making. That a lot of my friends that I was hanging out with kind of drifted away. So there are consequences, but what would happen is all the people around me, the vibration of everybody started raising as I started, taking responsibility for my life, making self-honoring choices. Because I think that's one of the things. It sounds like when you went to that boyfriend, you made a self-honoring choice. It was like you made a line in the sand that I'm going to honor myself and make my choices from that place. And that's what I consistently do over and over again. Now, I remember when I was first shifting from, I don't care what people think, I felt like such a bitch because I was trained to be nice. And then I had to realize that what other people's judgments about me are about them. It's not about me. And so that's another thing about people standing up and being visible and telling their stories. When we get visible, there are always going to be people who judge. I mean, people are judging us anyway, so why not be visible and tell your story, right? And then, I even coach my clients to, have a protective bubble around themselves, right? Because even with forgiveness work, I've had people be like, why do you forgive your mother? Why should you forgive her? And I'm like, because of the model she set for me of how it's okay to be treated by someone who says they love you. You know what I'm saying? But I remember that was in a Q&A after my show, and I thought, how interesting. I could tell that woman lives as a victim to somebody. And my I guess my lessons are not to then judge people who judge me, to be fierce in catching my judgment, because it's a human thing, catching yourself, comparison and things like that.
Absolutely. No, I love this. And I think this has been such a powerful conversation. So I really want the women that are listening to this, if you have a story that's holding you back, just realize that you're minimizing your greatness. I mean, you are here to do magnificent things. And on that note, Brenda, we're almost out of time, but before we go, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Okay, so my website is forgiveness andfreedom.com, forgivenessandfreedom.com. I have a free 3-part video training series called Tell Your Story, Heal Yourself, Create More Wealth. And it goes into, 7 different ways that you can tell your story to heal yourself, make an impact on others, and really live on purpose. And that is at forgivenessandfreedom.com/free training. And then I'm on Facebook as well. I have The Naked Storyteller is my group on Facebook.
Awesome. And people can also go to the show notes. So if you want to grab that gift, you can go ahead and click on the link in the show notes and get access to that. Brenda, this has been fantastic. It's been an on fire and inspiring interview. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners and viewers out there, I do have a favor. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please do 3 things: review, rate, and subscribe, because that helps other people looking for shows just like that, looking for inspiration. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Until next time, this is Heather Picken. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. So if you found this show to be helpful, please hashtag WOFE, that stands for Woman on Fire Entrepreneur, and subscribe to this show in iTunes and leave me a review. I want to know how these shows have helped you. I also want to know the number one thing that you're struggling with the most in your business. Every week, I give away complimentary sessions to help you get it clear on your next steps and to activate your money mojo. You can learn more about my work if you go to www.heatherpicken.com.